You're listening to Thunder Quack Podcast Network. This is the Thunder Quack Podcast, the official podcast of Thunder Quack Podcast Network, where anything can happen. So strap yourselves in and hold on to your butts. It's Thunder Quack time!
Hello and welcome back to the Thunder Quack Podcast, the official podcast of thunderquack.com, which you can get early every Tuesday over at patreon.com/thunderquack, or you can wait and get it late on podcast services around the globe every Friday. I am one of your hosts, Michael Cohen.
And I'm your other host, Amanda Conkin.
We're back. We're back on our regular schedule. Everything's kind of... I don't want to say returning to normal, because things aren't returning to normal. The world is still on fire. It is still chaos out there.
People think they're returning to normal, and it really freaks me out. I took the bus for the first time this weekend, and some dude was coughing just for the sake of coughing because he could see all the people wearing masks around him. And it was God. It really made me angry. Like, it was going to the Juneteenth march downtown, where everybody was so great. Like, this march was so safe. People were so respectful of distancing. The things that people were giving out were like face masks that specifically said like Black Lives Matter and like shirts and stuff. Like, everybody was wearing a mask. The medics were like making sure that everybody had masks. It was so good. The worst part about me going to this march was the stupid bus, because people were just being like deliberate. Like, you could tell it was deliberate, like him just being a jerk. And it was really frustrating.
It's kind of like I've been saying a lot lately, because restaurants and stuff are opening back up for dine-in, and Crystal a couple weeks ago was like, "Oh, we had to have a date night on the calendar," technically, because we put the date nights on the calendar like months in advance, because we got to coordinate it with her parents and whatnot to have childcare and all that sort of thing. So. She's like, it's on the calendar technically, but like, what could we even go do? It's like, would you want to go to a restaurant without the girls or whatever? I'm like, I don't want to go to a restaurant because the people who are eating in restaurants right now are specifically the type of people I don't want to be anywhere near at the moment. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah,
it's like,
no, that's
like,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's not like you walk in and everybody is being thoughtful and conscientious and taking all of the appropriate precautions. The people who are sitting in a restaurant today are the people who are like, whatever, it's not even real anyways, right? Yeah. Like, those are the people that are in a restaurant. And like, back on my birthday, the Spaghetti Factory had opened back up. It's one of my favorite places to eat. And yes, I am aware it's not authentic Italian food. That's not the point. It tastes yummy, and I like it. I also have restaurants that I go to for authentic Italian food. They're different. But yeah, so I wanted Spaghetti Factory for my birthday. They had just opened back up, so we got a takeout order. So I drove all the way out to the nearest one, and actually, that's not true. It's not the nearest one. It's the second nearest one, because the nearest one is garbage. But I drove all the way out to the one that we like, and went in to get the food, and took one look around the restaurant and was like, I don't want to be in here with these people. Like, it was.
Yeah, it's certain people that are doing like.
Yeah, you could just tell by the way that they were behaving and carrying themselves. And I had a mask on, and like, I got looks, and it was just like, it's just a vibe, right? Like, I don't think I need to explain it. It was a vibe of like, oh, none of you think that this is a big deal. Like, you are, and this was back in May, like, this was a month ago. So, even like we were even sort of like at the higher risk point than we are now. So But people think because the restrictions started lifting that it's time to just go back to life as normal. It's not.
I haven't responded to my sister yet, who messaged this morning being like, I just crushed my first gym workout in 3 months. And I just want to be like, why did you go to the gym?
Your
are you doing?
mentality as opposed to your sister's mentality is very similar to me versus my brother.
Yeah, like it's just...
And it's like they came down, and they were doing stuff, and it was like they wanted to see us, and they wanted to see the girls because we haven't seen each other in forever because they just moved up to Kelowna at the beginning of the year.
Right.
And it was like, okay, well, what have you guys been doing? You know, like, have you been safe or whatever? And it's like, oh, yeah. And then we find out when they're here, it's like they stayed with one group of friends one night, like the first night that they were down, and then they were staying with a different people the other night, and then they were seeing us and my parents, and it's like, you guys aren't being safe at all.
Yeah.
Like, you've just encountered all of these people as well as their circles.
Yeah.
And then you're going to go back to the Okanagan and take whatever you've got back there with you. Like, it's
yeah.
I don't know. There's just and I think the key problem is that people think of it from their own selfish perspective of like, well, I'm not worried about getting it. I'll be fine.
Yeah.
And they're not thinking about themselves as a vector, right? Like, because that's how you have to think of yourself, is not as a human being that's going to get infected and die from it. If you're a healthy person, then chances are you will likely shrug it off, right? Mm-hmm. You could have complications. It could trigger stuff that you didn't know that you had as problems, or it could just progress, and then if it does, you're going to end up with lifelong problems. So it's not worth the risk anyways. But the immoral part of it is not considering that your actions could kill another person, right? And most likely probably not somebody that you know. Probably, like, you know, if you're sick and you go out, you're not wearing a mask, you're not washing your hands, you're not taking the proper precautions, and then you get somebody else sick because you've got it, and then that person has complications and dies from it. That's on you. Whether you know that it happened or not, that's on you. Yeah. So better to just, you know, take every precaution necessary, take every precaution available to you. And I know it sucks. Like, everybody acts like, yeah, but it's hard. It's no duh.
Yeah. Like, it's my mom's birthday on Wednesday, and I haven't got her something yet because I genuinely don't know what to get her for her birthday. Like, usually I send her to go get a pedicure, or and I just can't bear to just get her a Tim Hortons gift certificate because that's what I get her. Like, they're doing that every day, is just going to get coffee at Tim Hortons, and it's like the thing that they do, and I'm kind of like, I want to do something, but there's nothing that I can give her or like that she can go do. And I get it. It sucks for people, but it's all part of this larger, it's just too much. But it's the idea that people that don't care about these small things are the ones that care about the small things that actually are become problems, right? Yeah. Like tearing down statues and all that stuff, right? They're like, well, why do we like want to change this? And it's just the way it is, and it's history and all. I don't know. I feel like there's a correlation between people that think that it's more important that they do something interesting with their day than try to protect those that are vulnerable in the population.
You mean the Venn diagram is a circle?
The Venn diagram is a circle, essentially, yeah. And if people which was the thing that I had never thought of before. You posted on your Facebook the idea of changing the name of British Columbia.
Yeah.
Because of British and Columbia and the like origins of colonialism and stuff like that. And it was just something that I had never thought about before. And your first impulse was something like that, because of the way that I have been raised and ingrained, is for me to be like, why? But then the second impulse, right? Like you check yourself, because I've been exposed to this, where I go, why not? Change it. If it hurts people, just change it, right? Like, why would you fight against something like that when in the large scheme of things, who cares what the name of your province is? Like,
Well, my thing, because I know what I'll hear from white people on that, which is that, like, yeah, but it's called British Columbia, and I've lived here my whole life, and that's what we call it, and I'm proud of it, and so I don't want to change it because that's part of my identity is I'm a British Columbian. It's like, yeah, but the people who lived here before you, they called it something different. And then white people came and said, no, this is British Columbia now. And they weren't really part of that conversation. They didn't get to have a seat at the table when
right?
that happened.
Yeah.
So that name is actually like if somebody walked into your house and went, I own this house now. And you said, no, you don't. This is my house. I've lived here for 5 years. We bought this house. Our name is on the deed. And they went, yeah, but I have guns and you don't. So this is my house now, and now I call it British Columbia. It's like that's colonialism in its most pure form, right?
Dude, do you remember that
But
play?
people don't think of it that way. People think
No.
of it as what we talked a little bit about it last week, like the Lewis and Clark thing, and it's like adventurers, right? And it's like the nonsense of all of the adventurers. Every adventure that ever happened was a couple of white guys being real brave. When that's not really the case. That's not
But
really.
it's one of these things where you just completely forget, like Colombia, and because it's all over the place, and it's like it's pretty well regarded that Christopher Columbus was not a very great person, right?
Yeah.
And you just like forget that it comes from all of these like derivatives of. Anyways, it's interesting.
Yeah.
So.
So I am all for a conversation about this, even if that's all it ever ends up being. It's like I totally recognize that changing the name of a province is.
It's a big deal.
Happen.
Like it's not gonna change overnight. But
Yeah.
it's one of those things where it's
but a
like it's part
conversation
of
is
this larger.
important.
Yeah, you know what could at least happen is that the Edmonton Eskimos could change their name. Like
Yeah.
there are small things that matter, and I think that it's because it's small. It's like, why would you dig in your heels to something when it means something so much more to somebody else? Like it's small to you. Like does it really matter to you when it could be so important to somebody else? And it's like just like. Be on the side of. Anyways, I love that I'm learning like all this great stuff, and anyways, and that this history of colonialism is not that far away, and that's what I was going to say. Like I made you come see a play that I directed where literally it was about like during the like in Kosovo and all like the crisis, and how people were like kicked out of their houses and came back to see other people literally living in their houses, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like you just displaced people is not like this ancient old thing that happened so long ago. Like it happens all the time, and just being conscious of like how we treat that and how we like.
Well,
anyways.
people want to think, particularly in Canada, of settling Canada as something that happened. You know, it's like, well, the Bible happened, and then they discovered North America, and then it's now, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, but actually, like it's only been a couple hundred years, and a lot of the stuff that we were doing as part of that imperialist colonial expansion was still happening as late as the 70s. Yeah. So like things like residential schools in Canada.
Jeez, yeah.
Were happening as late as the 1970s, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, I think even later than that. Like I remember it being shocking when I was learning about the true like when the last residential school closed and stuff.
And it's something that like to put it in real perspective.
Yeah, 1984.
Okay, 1984. There you go. So it is something that
1996. Oh my God, sorry. It's just way later. It's just way later than we think it is.
In my own family, because I have First Nations heritage, like in my own family, there are very literal emotional scars that I feel as a result of residential schools. So, and it's like, and like I present as a white guy. So like I benefit from all of the privilege of that. And yet, it's close enough generationally in my family history that the scars of the abuse and trauma from residential schools is something that I feel, right?
Right.
So it's like these are not concepts that should be foreign, but a lot of the time, like, we're afraid to talk about stuff like that. We just kind of, it's an uncomfortable subject, right? I'm talking a lot lately about the fact that we have to have uncomfortable conversations. And, you also have to be respectful. I can't go into detail on it because it involves other people in my family and it's not my story to tell. But I can say that my experience is that I know that some of the nonsense that I have to deal with in my family, from multiple places, multiple people, has a lot to do with that history. And there are definite aspects of my family makeup that want to deny our heritage because that was drilled into people. Like that was the purpose of residential schools. Like they would take the kids that could pass as Caucasian, and they would separate them and go like, no, you're going to go live with a white family now, and we're going to pretend like you are not what you are.
Oh, let's talk
right?
about geeky things, talking about the history of
Yeah.
the world and all of these important things. We'll circle back to the important things.
It's but just to all of that to say, to tie it back to the Black Lives Matter movement and all that sort of thing, is that like people want to act like slavery was forever ago. Residential schools, Japanese internment camps, that's also very, very recent. And then looking at where we are right now with the way that Indigenous people are treated, the way that Hispanic and Latino people are treated in the United States, and what is still presently going on right now and hasn't changed, hasn't stopped, and there are still children in cages. And then obviously what's happening with the police and specifically the African American community, but Black people all over the world. Like it's global, man. And like these scars are present. They are today. This stuff is not textbooks. It's not history. It's the life that we have to deal with every day. So if tearing down a Confederate statue or getting rid of Gassy Jack in Gastown in Vancouver makes those, like you said, vulnerable, although I bristle at the term vulnerable because it kind of victimizes a little bit, but the and that's just my personal thing. I don't know
if did I use the word vulnerable?
I think you said vulnerable at one point, but I also like it's part of the language of what people talk about.
But I understand what you're talking about too, that it does have this connotation.
Yeah.
But like those populations that are directly impacted by the negative
if a statue does harm, it's not worth keeping up.
Yeah.
Get rid of it.
And I didn't know this, but I hope everybody is learning more than they've ever learned before about the history of the world. How did I not know that Confederacy was like 4 or like less than 5 years?
Yeah.
Like and that slavery was like what, 250 or something like that? Because you always just assume that it's together, and it's not. Literally, Confederacy was because they were ending slavery and they didn't want to it's specifically racist.
Yeah.
Like, I will never again let anybody, I mean, not that I had a lot of leeway for people previously. I don't think anybody's ever come up to me talking about the Confederacy before, but in my brain, I didn't have the same understanding of this BS term history. Come on, that is so flimsy. At best, flimsy is the how you can describe anybody that talks about Confederacy as being something that is worth memorializing in any way. And so I just can't. My favorite
meme that I see that pops up every time this stuff about the Confederate flag and whatever.
Yeah.
These statues and all that sort of thing that pops up is like, oh yeah, you hear about in Germany they're tearing down all of the Nazi statues and renaming all of the military bases that are named after Nazi generals and stuff. And it's like, no, they're not. Because in Germany, they don't do that stuff because they recognize that was a black spot, like a black mark on their history. Like they don't have to tear that stuff down because they've already acknowledged as a culture, like, dang, we messed up. Like, we royally screwed the pooch on that one. And
Germans have a lot of checks and balances as a people because they understand and have learned. Now, granted, I don't really know about the statue situation in Germany, so that's something I can't really.
No, I mean, like, they like it's pretty famous that like you go to Germany, you go to like a museum, and like there will not just be like a little section on World War II. It's like half the museum is devoted to World War II because it's such an important part of their history, and it's not obviously glorifying what happened. It is meant to be there as like the stark reminder of like, don't ever let us go down this path again.
Yeah. And like what you could and like how people in power and
the pain that was caused both outside of Germany and within the country in the like for the goal of this madman, right? Like it's it's the sort of thing that Americans are way too prideful to look back on the last 4 years when we're out of this, hopefully in January, and say like, hey man, we should really devote some time and effort to memorializing the mistakes that we made in this period of time.
And to celebrating the K-pop stans that are helping to slowly tear apart the dictatorship in America. Yeah,
I mean, like, I think that they'll be very proud of themselves. Like, not all of America, obviously. I think it's a minority in America. It's just, oh man. Yeah, you're right. Let's talk about something geeky. Let's talk about some news.
Did we talk about K-pop last time? I think we talked a little bit about.
We definitely mentioned it. It came up that.
I think
they took over the Whiteout Wednesday hashtag and.
But it becoming like even bigger with the Tulsa thing, like the buying up all the tickets for. I just love these memes that are coming up from like people that are even our age or like older that are now like the generations below below, where everybody's like, did Gen Z know that this was happening? And Gen Z just looking around being like, yeah, we did this intentionally. We understand social media and we understand the state of the world. And it's just like beautiful. It's
so funny because I think people forget, and I don't know, maybe one day I'll also forget, sort of like that Peter Pan thing of like forgetting where you came from eventually because you just live in the moment or whatever. But I was trying to make a real effort to remember how I felt as a teenager and what I thought about and the stuff that was important to me, because that's what's important to teenagers today.
Right.
And the specifics of it change, but the feeling, the gut, the heart of it doesn't change. Teenagers are teenagers, and in my experience working with them, it's like where it comes from, the core of it is always the same. What machine they're fighting against, it sometimes changes its face, but it's always kind of the same thing. And I can remember us having, like, we had a walkout to protest the war in Iraq. We did stuff too.
Yeah, there was things that we would do. Yeah.
And we didn't have social media yet. We had MSN Messenger that we could coordinate with. So like, obviously I think this generation has the benefit of technology that we didn't have. And the majority of people want to come down on them and say that they're just connected. They're always connected, blah, blah, blah. They can't put their devices down. It's like, well, neither can we. But they're actually doing meaningful stuff with their devices. Whereas, like
it's
we're
a different way of connecting.
Crush.
We've talked about that all the time, that it's just like a different way of like connecting.
I just think it's important to it's important to do two things. Never take the generation that came before you as seriously as they tell you to take them, and always take the generation after you more seriously than everybody is telling you to take them, because like that I think if you live by that rule of thumb when it comes to these generational divides, that you'll stay in a safe zone. Because if you listen to the boomers and the Gen Xers and let their rhetoric get to you, then you're playing right into their traps, right? As a millennial, which we're talking to our audience, which is mostly millennials, and I think a few Gen Xers, and maybe we've got a couple of Gen Zs in this audience now. I highly doubt it. I don't think that we really do. But
podcasts take too much. They're too long, and they're like antiquated. Yeah. It's antiquated. Can't we just TikTok our ideas?
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe we've got a couple of you that stick it out. But I'm not gonna listen to any of those Gen Xers or Boomers because their ideas are still rooted in cassette tapes and VCRs. But when Gen Z talks, like, I'm very
keen to listen.
Like, I'm very thoughtful about it, mindful of it, because they have lessons to teach us. It's that thing of, like, the generation before us or generations before us, we need to learn from their mistakes and grow beyond them. That's important, like, sort of as a cultural evolution sort of thing. But it's equally, if not more important, that we listen to the generation that's coming up after us, especially when they're telling us what mistakes we're presently making. Yeah. Because we still have an opportunity to change that. Where millennials are at right now, our neuroplasticity is still at a point where we can adapt to new ideas. And
are you sure? I don't know. I feel like all my neuroplasticity is gone, and
it's going. My ways. It's definitely going. Look, I'm not going to play Fortnite with them because they're just going to wipe the floor with me, because I can't, like, what? You got to build stuff and shoot things? Can't do it. But if they tell me that, like, hey, you're the way that you interact with activism is stupid, I'm going to be like, okay. Tell me.
That's the best.
Because it hasn't done anything for us yet, right? Like, it hasn't done anything, but it hasn't been as effective as I think we would want our activism to have been in the past. What did we do wrong? For the most part, I think that we sat behind computer screens and reblogged a thing and signed a petition and went, well, I did my thing.
Right. Yeah.
Like the whole slacktivism thing. And I do think that that's a real trap that a lot of people in our generation have fallen into. And the generation coming up after us is seeing that and seeing that it didn't get us anywhere. 2016 versus 2020, or not 2016, 2014 versus 2020, right? Ferguson to now. It's like, here we are again. The same thing is happening again. It's very different this time around. And I think that the reason it's different this time around is because a whole new generation has come of age and is saying, hey, we watched this on social media 6 years ago when we were impressionable children, and it was horrifying then, and it's still happening today, and we're saying enough. And to me, it's like, yeah, yes, it's enough, and please, you have the energy and the knowledge to do something about it, and so we need to listen to them and then take our voting power as millennials and take it to the polls and get the job done and support that. But
dude, I've talked about this meme before, but like that meme where it's like the millennials versus the Gen Z, and it's that like old guy with the cereal or whatever it is he's eating out of a pot, and he's like, hey, what's going on? And the Gen Z is like teenage rebellion. And then the guy's like, yeah, stick it to the old people. And it's like millennials being like, you go.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Like, we're old. Millennials are old.
Yeah,
so we're learning. We're learning.
Anyways, like I said, let's get into geeky
TikTok.
stuff. Let's talk about support Gen Z, down with the patriarchy, the white supremacists, and I don't know who else.
Support BTS.
Support BTS. K-pop stans are the future. If you don't understand what that means, you're part of the problem. But it's not too late. It's not too late. You can still learn.
I would highly suggest you use John Oliver to learn, because he is fan-freaking-tastic and continues to do amazing coverage.
It's a 1-2 punch. There's a 1-2 punch. John Oliver, who's going to keep you up to date on like the current stuff. And then I would say Hassan
Minaj?
Yeah, Hassan Minaj. What's his show called?
Patriot
Act, yeah.
Patriot Act, yeah.
On Netflix, for the deep dives on specific subjects, which like John Oliver definitely goes into deep dives, but not as deep. Because he'll take a segment from like The Daily Show or John Oliver, and on Patriot Act they'll go 25 minutes just on that subject, and it's like you will have to change the way that you live your life after some of the stuff that you learn watching that show. But it's a challenge that I think that everybody should give themselves. I think if you're watching those two shows, you can stay pretty informed.
Yeah. It's good.
Cool. Before we get too far into news, I'm just gonna say, this is a bit of a developing story, but Cobra Kai is coming to Netflix in advance of the season 3 premiere, and as soon as that drops, which I'll let everybody know when that happens, because I'm a huge fan of Cobra Kai, I suggest everybody watches it.
I just saw you post that. Like, is it live
so
action?
Yeah.
Cobra Kai.
And for those who don't know, Cobra Kai is the sequel, revival, reboot of the Karate Kid franchise, of which there are 4 movies in that continuity. And Cobra Kai is better than most of those sequels. It was
a web series, and does it actually have the actual rights from Karate Kid? Like,
it's William Zabka and Ralph Macchio. It is the sequel. It's like everything these days. It's no different than The Force Awakens or the Rocky movies or any of that stuff. It's like, no, this is the continuing story. But for my money, and more than Star Wars, Cobra Kai is the best franchise follow-up that's happened to date, in my opinion.
That's high praise, man.
Like, what you have to understand is that Karate Kid, that first movie is one of my perfect 10 trademark patent pending movies. That falls under that list.
Don't hate me, Michael.
Yeah, you've never seen it.
I know.
Look, there's a busload of movies that you've never seen that it's tragic that you've never seen.
So upsetting.
That you really don't have any excuse. Karate Kid is a perfect movie. Karate Kid is amazing.
All right. It's the wax on, wax off movie, right?
Yeah, it is the wax on, wax off movie.
See, I know things.
And Karate Kid Part 2 is pretty good. It's an interesting follow up, and I like it a lot. Part 3 gets into some shaky territory, and then the next Karate Kid is a very 90s attempt to revive that series that didn't quite work.
And then they sat around doing nothing and were revived in 2020 to make a web series.
It's been a few years now that Cobra Kai's been running, because this is season 3 that we're going into. But but there was an attempt to reboot it, like a straight up reboot, the Jackie Chan, Jaden Smith.
Reboot, I remember hearing about
which is also a good movie. Like, I had nothing bad to say about that movie, except for the fact that the theme song at the end that plays over the credits is featuring it's a Justin Bieber song featuring Jaden Smith.
So here's the thing:
Justin Bieber's a dirtbag, so
he is a little bit. But am I allowed to like Jaden Smith?
Yeah.
Because I feel like I'm always unclear where like the Smith family sits in the scale of like Hollywood skis, because they're always like peripherally really awesome.
Yeah.
But also it's very weird. Like I never quite know what's going on with them, and they just anyways they're a really interesting like family, and I just think that it's sort of cool. But it is this thing where every once in a while somebody will say something where I'm like, was that a good thing that was just referenced? That is like a thing that they were involved in.
Would Jaden Smith have been cast in the Karate Kid with Jackie Chan if he wasn't Will Smith's son? No, of course not. Of course not. He's there because of who he is and because he's a legacy, right? Like he owes his career to his dad, 100%. Does that mean that that he's a bad person? No.
No, of course. No, I'm not saying that.
He's taking advantage of the privilege that he's got, and I can't blame him for that. I can't blame Willow, his sister, for benefiting from that privilege either. It's like they do, but like here's the thing: is that they have Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith for parents, and those are like that's a powerhouse. Hollywood power couple, right?
Like, I knew there was something. There's something like problematic about something to do with like him having a vegan diet and actually causing these huge health problems. Like there's always just something that's a little bit like where you're like, are you okay? Like are you guys okay?
They're
as kids, like you're just like a little bit like
celebrities and then children of celebrities, right? Like and not celebrities, but like Will Smith is one of the highest paid actors in the world, right? Like,
right. Yeah.
Like he's responsible for some of the top grossing movies of all time in Men in Black and Independence Day, right? So, that comes with the territory, I think.
Can I just say?
Yeah.
This is really bothering me because I'm Googling them as we're talking.
Yeah.
And both of their Wikipedia pages say their full name, where they're like, Willow Camille Rain Smith, known mononymously as Willow. And I'm like, nobody just calls her Willow. She's Willow Smith. Same with Jaden's. It says Jaden, just known mononymously as Jaden. I was like, is he though? Like, if you just said Jaden, would you automatically assume that I was talking about Jaden
think what
Smith?
that's referring to is that they're not billed by their full names. They're billed as Willow Smith and Jaden Smith.
True. Anyways, I'm going to stop ragging on children that are just trying to do their best in
they're
their
not
world
children
to be
anymore,
celebrities.
so...
That's fair.
I'm pretty sure they're both adults now, but
we can talk about my 90s nostalgia now that's also coming to Netflix. Netflix is just cashing in on the 90s nostalgia. Or 80s. Is the Karate Kid 80s or 90s?
Karate Kid is 80s.
Yeah, okay. But the Babysitter's Club trailer was released, and I mean, I made Mike watch it, and I'm like, oh, it's so nostalgic, and he's like, nope.
Not for me.
But I think it just has to do with how, and I just want a few things of note for me is that they actually cast children, which I just think is so great to like make it like a movie about kids, because that's what the Babysitters Club is. Like, I don't know if anybody has read the books. Like, they're so cute. And
is it a movie or a series?
It's just a movie. I think it's just a I'm pretty sure it's just a movie. I thought it was just a movie. I think it's just a movie.
Okay.
Oh man, no, Netflix features okay. No, it could. This is, now you're messing with my brain. I'm pretty sure that it's a movie. I'm like 98% sure that it's a movie. I could be totally wrong. But the 1995 movie, The Babysitter's Club, is a movie with Soup's famous people like Rachel Leigh Cook and I feel like other famous people that you would know if you like looked at it. Anyways, cute movie about babysitters, and that's just literally what it is. It's about these like young kids learning how to be like how to run their own business and be...
It is absolutely episodic. It's 10 episodes.
Whoa. Yeah. What? How exciting. That's way better. I guess I'm thinking about the movie. I am so excited that this is now a series. So much to be excited about. But anyways, it has like the same classic characters, right, from the books and from the from the movies or from the movie, but I do love that that's the other one, Elisa Olink, or the one that was Alex Mack. How do you say her name? Larissa?
Sure. Yeah.
Olink. Anyways. Anyways, the movie was really awesome, and they're taking the same characters, but then they're modernizing it. But I do love that they have the like throwback to the really cool, like, you know, those see-through phones that had the like funky stuff where there's just a phone, and it took me a minute to realize, like, until they pointed it out in the trailer that those are not something that everyday kids use. I just totally bought into it, where I was like, oh, this is so great, it's the Babysitter's Club.
Oh,
the kids make a snarky comment about how it's like 20-year-old technology, and I'm like, oh, okay. I get it. It's true. Anyway, so it seems like it'll be really cool that they're gonna like modernize it so that it like hits with an everyday audience, but that it's something that you can like appreciate for where it originates, and it just has like these really like sort of like, it's just like for little kids, and I just love that it's like, I don't know. I said like so many times when I was describing that, but you know, I can't help but be
I do
14 years old.
appreciate that it is geared at the correct target audience. Yeah. Which is not something that can be said for a lot of stuff these days. Yeah. It looks like a really well-made series. It looks like the sort of thing that Kara might actually even be interested in, because it'll be aspirational for her. She'll look at these young teenage girls, and which she considers herself. She's almost 4. She'll be 4 in August.
She's a teenager. Oh dear.
And in her brain, she's a teenager. She constantly says like, I'm a grown up, basically. And it's like, you're not even a little tiny bit a grown up yet, kid. Yeah, she's so funny. So she might want to watch that, and although it's live action, which it's a little bit harder to get her to pay attention to, but just because she's 3.
I can't find how to like find the cast, because I feel like there's only like one person that I recognized in the trailer from it, and the problem is when you Google the Babysitter's Club, you get like all of the
it's called IMDb, and you just got to put the year in.
That's true. It took me a while to find it, and I found it right as I said that. So
yeah, Alicia Silverstone is the only person that I recognized.
I mean, that's fair.
But yeah, it looks like it'll be a fun one for people who care.
It'll just be fun and cute. So, which is exciting.
Cool. Let's talk about sad news for a second.
Okay.
We were talking about angry news earlier, but let's talk about sad news. So Joel Schumacher died. As we're recording this, like, it was announced this morning that he passed away. And he's going to be most famously known as the man who put nipples on Batman.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's kind of his legacy. But I'm just bringing up his IMDb. So as a director, I mean, most recently House of Cards, which, controversy about Kevin Smith, notwithstanding, but, that's pretty cool.
Controversy about Kevin Smith notwithstanding. Sorry,
Kevin
what was
Spacey.
the context? Oh, Kevin Spacey. Oh, sorry. I heard Kevin Smith. My brain was like, what are you talking
Kevin
about?
Spacey.
Kevin Spacey, right. Yes.
Let's see, but Batman and Robin and Batman Forever are the ones that everybody's gonna think about. But like, he also made 8mm, A Time to Kill, man. Like so much of the '90s was Joel Schumacher. The Client, which is a classic. I'm naming movies. Amanda has no idea what I'm talking about.
No, here I'm on IMDb anyways, looking up.
And then back in the '80s. The Lost Boys and St. Elmo's Fire, which are two very, I think, important films that kind of shape what we think of when we think of the 80s.
Wait, did you say Joel Schumacher?
Joel Schumacher, yeah.
No, it's my favorite Batman and Robin.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've just completely destroyed your cred. I know.
I've destroyed my cred on this podcast many a time, so I'm not concerned about that.
I will say, like, for all of the crap that those two movies get, I like them. They're not good movies. They're not well constructed films.
Oh no, but they're just fun. Like, how can you not like Batman and Robin?
But yeah,
it's so fun.
For what he was going for, and certainly as follow-ups to the Tim Burton movies, which I honestly believe are not as, certainly Batman Returns, not as sacred as a lot of geeks want you to believe that they are. There are some serious issues in the Tim Burton Batman movies. Batman Returns again, particularly.
Wow, he started as a costume designer.
Yeah, he started a costume designer and became a director. He's lots of music videos and stuff as well.
Yeah, and like In Excess and all sorts of.
But yeah, I mean, Lost Boys. I think for anybody who's seen Lost Boys, they know, that's 80s.
Yeah.
Camp horror
St. Elmo Fire
at its best. Yeah. I mean,
The Phantom of the Opera, though, too, man.
Yeah.
I love that.
But those
movie.
Batman movies, his vision of Gotham is love it or hate it. It's crazy. It's on such an epic scale.
Yeah.
Particularly in Batman and Robin. I mean, the whole sequence where they're driving the Batmobile across the gigantic statues in Gotham City.
Yeah,
It's
so good.
he really created this comic book world that we hadn't seen before. And
John Glover is in Batman and Robin.
yeah. He's the scientist that Pamela Isley kills at the beginning, right?
Oh, no way!
That created the Bane Venom, I think.
Yeah! Man, I gotta watch this movie again this summer.
Yeah, I think, here's the thing. People watch Batman 1989 and then Batman Returns, and they're like, oh, dark Batman. Oh, it's so cool. It's like Batman is he's never been seen before. He's all black. There's no blue on his suit. There's no gray. It's just all black. Batman with the yellow thing is so cool. He's got the Batwing, and the thing as it pops off and it turns into a missile car. And the Joker is scary, and Penguin is a freak monster creature, and Catwoman is sexy in a way that comic books hadn't been sexy before, and it's that it pushed the envelope in a lot of those directions, and it's really important for those things. And then Batman Forever comes along, and Schumacher takes it in this completely different direction, back towards the 1966 Batman, but not all the way with Batman Forever. It's still a lot of the 1989 Tim Burton vibe. And it's still very sort of self-serious. And then they make Batman and Robin, and George Clooney comes in. And George Clooney, a fantastic actor, I think does exactly what he was supposed to do in that movie, which is he's not trying to follow up Keaton, which is what Val Kilmer was trying to do. Right. He's playing Adam West. And he literally whips out his Batman MasterCard at one point in the movie. It's the movie's full of product placement, and it's ridiculous and silly, and the suit up scenes are obnoxious. And connecting it back to Babysitter's Club, Alicia Silverstone is Batgirl. And they completely mess up that character's origin, but who cares? It's not that big a deal. And her Batsuit has high heels, and it's really creepy that her great uncle designed the thing for her. And it has a goddamn bat thong, right? There's literally a shot in that where she puts on the belt, and then it whip pans around and just shows her butt for a solid 2 seconds. And you can see that molded into the rubber suit is a thong, because it was whatever year it was, 1998, I want to say, 97, right? So it's that's where we were at. That's where we were at. Is it a good Batman movie? Yeah, it is, because Batman is all over the goddamn place. Dude. If you anybody who wants to act like Batman is this sacred text, it's not. There's stupid stuff in Batman comic books. There's stupid stuff in the history of Batman, and there's also some ridiculous stuff that is awesome, like the 1966 series. And I think that with age, Batman and Robin has gotten better, in my opinion, because one of the things people go to a lot of the time is Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze, and you know,
so good,
awful
with his
casting
puns.
and whatever. He's so bad and all the puns, and it's like, no, you're thinking about it wrong. First of all, it's connecting back to 1966 Batman. That's how the supervillains talked. That's what we're going for, right? And Uma Thurman is doing an Eartha Kitt impression as Poison Ivy. Like they're specifically sending up the 1966 series, and as an homage to that, with 1997 technology and the budget, it nails it, in my opinion. The other part of it is, think about who Mr. Freeze is as a character, right? He's a scientist who becomes a supervillain. He's a nerd, a science nerd, that becomes an ice-themed supervillain. Of course he's going to make ice puns.
These publicity stills are just fantastic.
Isn't it the best?
Go on IMDb, like they are. The photo shoots
like,
are just
I can taste
so
the McDonald's extra value meal.
I know.
That
like,
came with the mug or whatever, right?
This was like my child. And here's the thing. As a like very self-proclaimed like Superman fan,
yeah,
all the way. Like I watched like all of season 10 again like over the weekend because I was just like, because I had watched Man of Steel the weekend before because it was like the anniversary or whatever, and so I'd watched like all the like recent Justice League and Batman and stuff, and so Superman versus Batman and all that stuff, and so I was in this like Superman withdrawal, and I was like, I want to watch Superman. So then I just went and watched like my favorite Lois and Clark episodes of Smallville, and then that just led to me watching all of season 10 of Smallville because let's face it, that's what that show is season 10 of Smallville is just Lois and Clark. But when I think back to my childhood, this specific Batman and Robin movie was like my first like superhero like thing that I watched on a regular basis. Like
yeah.
I'm actually like having this revelation just now as we're talking, where I'm realizing
you buried it deep.
I buried it real deep.
It's a trauma.
I really viscerally am mad that Batman is one of my like first sort of like superhero connections.
It's just the timing, right? Like it's,
yeah, I mean it is
100%
like
just the timing.
Yeah, when I was a kid.
And sometimes we don't get to make those choices, but and sometimes we get lucky. I saw a thing on Twitter and retweeted it the other day about you know, like what's your favorite video game from the year you were 12, and I looked it up, and it's 1997, the same year that Batman and Robin came out. And I'm like, well, this is not fair because I was 12 in 1997. Like that's Final Fantasy VII. It's man, I'd have to go back through the list again, but it's like, it's crazy. Like, and what I landed on was Star Fox 64. And like, but it's just like it was like the beginning, like the peak of, not quite the peak, but like the beginning of the Nintendo 64 and the PlayStation 1, like coming out with all these incredible new games. That was like the beginning of a new era of gaming with 3D games. Right. And it's like sometimes you get lucky like that, and then other times you're that age and your first superhero movie that you go to and take seriously is Batman and Robin, and you know
it's just how it is.
It is what it is. Like you play the hand you're dealt, right?
Yeah. But this is totally like you're saying you were 12. I would have been 11, right? In 1997. This movie is totally made for 11-year-olds.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Like,
well, and like I went to it and I walked out of it like that was awesome. I don't like I didn't think it was bad.
That I take for granted is the things I liked about it was Alicia Silverstone and Uma Thurman. Yeah. Because I'm a girl and they were these cool, like even like it's cool when you have representation on both sides, right? Like the kick-ass villain and the kick-ass lady, like being a hero and a villain. Like it was, oh man, I'm getting more and more respect the more we talk about this. I feel like we've talked about Batman and Robin on this podcast a lot in the past.
It's it's probably come up in the past, but I think it gets way more flack than it deserves.
Oh, for sure.
And yeah, like the bat nipples are ridiculous, and Batgirl's whole situation is in the year 2020. It's problematic to say the least. But I will say that Alicia Silverstone rocks that outfit. Like,
Oh,
she
yeah.
looks
Oh, yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah. And I mean, it's fun and aspirational too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, superheroes, the thing is, you look at any superhero where you're like, the Superman costume is very, like, I don't know, every iteration, you need to be very jacked to be able to fit into the Superman costume properly. I don't know. So.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. What else we got? What other news did we want to touch on before we take our break?
I feel like those were the main ones that I had on my end. I can't remember if there was any other news to talk about. So.
Cool.
Oh, Michael Keaton in The Flash.
Oh yeah.
That was the last thing.
Speaking of Batman,
Yeah.
Michael Keaton is rumored to be reprising the role of Batman in the Ezra Miller Flash movie, which is, I think, being called Flashpoint at this time. Here's the thing. There's three things to this. The first thing that I'll open with is I absolutely want to see Michael Keaton reprise the role of Bruce Wayne, on the big screen. That goes without saying. Michael Keaton is fantastic. I love him, and he's Batman. It's awesome. That would be great. This Flash movie is never going to happen, so it's a moot point anyways.
Why do you say that?
Because it's been in development for like 6 years, and it's changed. The plot has changed like 4 times.
Yeah, I don't think they really know what they're doing yet.
It's not happening. It's not happening. The only reason I could see this movie happening as Flashpoint is because it's an opportunity for them to maintain they get to keep the continuity in the same way that Star Trek did with the 2009 movie. They get to keep the old continuity. They're not blowing it up, but they get to start fresh.
Right.
Flashpoint, for people who don't know, is Flash goes back in time, changes the events of his mother's death to save her. But that breaks the timeline, and when he gets back to present day, everything's gone wrong. In Back to the Future 2 fashion. They've just completely ruined everything. So he ends up going back, fixing it, but the alteration, even the slight alteration that he makes when he goes back to the present that he fixed, some things have changed. It happened in the Arrowverse. They did Flashpoint. And
then just ruined stupid little things that...
Most notably, they removed the character Sarah... Diggle?
I guess, yes.
I guess Sarah Diggle, yeah. So I have a hard time thinking that that's his last name, but it is. It's why they call him Diggle. He's John Diggle. And they replaced her with JJ, with John Jr. Now, by the end of Arrow, they fixed that, and they both exist now, so it's fine. But yeah, so Flashpoint did stuff like that, where it altered things, but not completely. So you have a scenario where you can say, like, okay, if Flashpoint happens, then Batman is erased as we know him, but like when we come back with the Robert Pattinson Batman, if that one's successful, we can say that that's part of the continuity. We can say that the first Suicide Squad is pre-Flashpoint, and we can say that Birds of Prey is post-Flashpoint. And that's why there's these weird discrepancies. And now we have an in-universe explanation for it.
Isn't that the whole purpose of the Flash, though, is to exist to, like, fix plot holes?
Well, I don't know if that's the whole purpose of the Flash.
Yes,
I think that Flash fans would find that really reductive and insulting. But
I didn't mean for it to be insulting. I meant for it to be reductive, though. So
it's kind of go hand in hand. But
fair.
It would also mean that Henry Cavill could continue to play Superman even if they blow up the Justice League Man of Steel timeline. So
right.
I
would only want him if he stayed with Amy Adams as well, because I think that they work really well together. And I just love that she discovered who he was before he discovered who he was. I just think that that's like the truest, lowest continuity that you could possibly have.
Are we here to talk about Flash, or are we here to talk about Superman?
Well, sorry, we could talk
I'm
about
gonna keep you on point because we have a big topic to talk about after we
fine.
do our ads. So if all of that could happen, I would be behind that. I would think that that's great. But here's the thing. If it's going to happen with Ezra Miller, I'm out. I don't care. I don't want any part of it. Like, I don't want to support his career. First of all, from the outset, I've said that his portrayal of Barry Allen is offensive. He's yet another example of a super autistic character who has extra superpowers because he's autistic, and I hate that. It's a stupid trope, and it's offensive, and it shouldn't exist. I don't think that Hollywood should support it. The shows like The Good Doctor and like, it just, the idea that autism, it comes from the movie Rain Man, which is a fantastic movie, where there's a plot point in that movie where a box of matches falls on the ground, and Dustin Hoffman's character, the titular Rain Man, is able to instantly see the matches and count how many fell on the ground, right?
Did you just explain the plot of Rain Man?
Yeah. And then Tom Cruise takes him to Vegas and they count cards. That's like that. That's not the plot of Rain Man. The plot of Rain Man is that Tom Cruise is the younger brother of Dustin Hoffman, who is a adult with autism, right. And their father dies, and then he's trying to get his inheritance, but in order to do that, has to deal with his brother, his older brother, who's been in a home his entire life, and then they end up forming a bond, and he grows as a person, blah blah blah. It's a great movie. Rain Man is an awesome film. But Hollywood took that little nugget and went, oh, autistic people are super mathematicians. And it's like, no. Some people with autism, because it's a spectrum, and at the time they didn't classify it that way, right? But now we classify it as a spectrum. And there are all sorts of different things that autism presents as, and it's a whole... in my opinion, it's a little bit of a catch-all for a whole bunch of different things. And in 10 years, we'll look back on it and go, like, oh, the way that we diagnose people with ASD was, not helpful. But it's better than the way that they did it in the 80s. So in any case, like, it's turned into a person with autism has... like, they have all of these social deficits and functional deficits, but the human mind makes up for it with one thing that they're super good at, which is it's offensive because it's not reality, right? Like, it sort of takes autism and turns it into this really, like, generalized superpower machine, so that you can say that, like, oh, the reason why the Flash is such a great forensic analyst in this world is because, he's got bad social skills because he's autistic, right? And the worst part of it is, like, the Big Bang Theory syndrome of, like, going the entire time talking about it without ever saying the word, because the word autism is a dirty word. Right? It's a swear almost. It's akin to using the R word to a lot of people. So, like, we don't ever say the word autistic, yet you're willing to use the trope, right? That is very clearly based off of this idea. And that portrayal of the Flash 100% does that. And it plays the social aspects of it as a joke, which is also offensive, separate from the super autism aspect of it. But, like, Batman basically being like, you're a weird guy. And then everybody in the audience is supposed to go, ha, it's true. He is a weird guy, right? It's like, none of this is helpful to society. This is all detrimental stuff. And then on top of that, Ezra Miller turns out he's a huge dirtbag because he chokeslams some fan because he was drunk or high or a combination of the two. And he's never come out and publicly apologized for it, as far as I know. As far as I've been able to find, I should say.
I do, because we're talking about stuff that's like I want to make sure that we don't like undermine all the work that he did do prior to that for like rights in the LGBTQ and queer community, and that Ezra Miller is one of the few actors that people refer to in Hollywood as they, because he identifies as genderqueer, and I just think that is it. An important. You can still be a garbage human being and have done a lot of good work for certain.
Yeah, it
causes,
doesn't mean that he hasn't done good stuff.
I just want to make sure that we're like clear that there are like if you look into stuff that Ezra Miller has done in his like in terms of like how he advocates and what he does. It sucks that this is like the most recent thing is this, because he also like there's also instances I think. What it was like a couple years ago or last year or something, where like at Comic-Con he like kissed someone who like was non-consenting, and so like there's little things like that, because it's part of his outrageous personality that in many ways has benefited for some of the causes that he's fought for, but is also sort of
problematic
complicates who
to
he
say
is
the
as a
least.
person. Problematic as a person.
So just for the sake of the conversation, I'll compare his behavior with similar behavior from Shia LaBeouf, who I a couple of years ago I would have said very similar stuff of like, I think he's a great actor, I really love a lot of the stuff that he's done, I think he's a bit of a garbage person, and but in recent years he's been working to make amends for it, and he definitely hit a rock bottom, and that resulted in him going to rehab and going through the process that he's gone through, and sort of coming out the other side of it as a bit of a different person. But this is the thing, so the two recent movies that he's made, Peanut Butter Falcon and Honey Boy, are both fantastic movies that I just watched recently. They're awesome, and I highly recommend them to people. And one of the reasons that, like, since he hit his rock bottom and went through the process in rehab and therapy and started unpacking some of the trauma in his life, he's owned the garbage human behavior that he's guilty of in the years prior, basically from the time that he got Transformers until he got in that car accident that landed him in rehab. He is the first person to bring up that, like, hey, I did horrible stuff for which there's not really anything that I can do to make up for it, but I am going to try and make amends regardless. Despite, like, and people can, like, you can see a lot of stuff in interviews with him where he's people can come to whatever conclusion they want about what I've done in the past, and and that's for them, but I know where I'm at and I know what I want to do and be a better person and that sort of thing. And he's shown like incredible growth, I think. And I say all that to say that like when you juxtapose these things, when I see somebody who's gone through that stuff, and I don't know Ezra Miller's story because I don't particularly like him as a performer either, so I'm less likely to dismiss his behavior as eccentricities in the way that I would with Shia LaBeouf, because I really like him, or liked him before.
And see, that's so interesting because I have the opposite.
It's a total personal bias thing, and similarly, like I own that, and I have to own that of like, I'm gonna judge them on different scales because I like his art versus his, right, versus theirs. Sorry.
He accepts all pronouns.
He accepts what?
He says that he's fine with male pronouns, but that he barely identifies as human, much less male or female. So there's. So I don't know, like there's so much, like honestly, until you tweeted today, Ezra Miller was like I loved him, and so it's like I've only had 5 hours to come because I just didn't.
You're still
pay
processing.
I'm still processing because I didn't pay attention.
Is the thing.
I haven't paid attention to Ezra Miller really because he's just sort of like I barely knew who he was a year ago, and then I learned about it, and I'm like, oh, this is so cool to have this actor that's like unabashedly like like fighting gender norms and just being true to who they are. And so it just was,
and I think it's totally fair to let your opinion of him evolve. Right?
I mean, as all things should, right?
Yeah, and that's
week.
what I'm talking about, like with Shia LaBeouf. Like when he comes out and he's on Jimmy Kimmel and he talks very candidly about this stuff, and his experiences in his life, and then you watch the movie. Like again, if you do like Shia LaBeouf at all, I think watch the movie. Regardless, I think that people should watch the movie Honey Boy. It's very uncomfortable. You're not gonna have a good time watching it, but it is a phenomenally well made film. And he wrote it, and it's autobiographical. It's a fictionalized account of his life, to the point where like names are changed and stuff. But it is very much about the relationship that he had with his father, specifically in the era when he was filming the show Even Stevens, and it's all about him unpacking the trauma of his relationship with his dad. And it's like, not only does he own it, but he owns it like in this public forum in a way that I think can help other people, right? Like he looked at his story and went, wow, I didn't realize that I was carrying around all of this trauma, and that's why I was acting the way that I was acting and treating people the way that I treated them, and my behavior was unacceptable, but here are the reasons why I behaved that way. I'm going to make this movie, and it's going to give other people the language to understand like the trauma in their lives and how it's affecting them and how they interact with other people. Well, so it like there's a real, not just a willingness to change and to learn and to grow, but also to be of service to other people. That it's like, that to me is the number one thing where I look at it and I go like look at that evolution of a human being. My opinion of him has to evolve along with that. Ezra Miller has been pretty silent about this whole choke slamming. And it's like the articles all go like, allegedly, according to video. And then it's like you watch the video and you see him grab this girl by the neck and throw her on the ground. Like, it's like there's no... And she's like coming up to like get a picture with him. And he's like, yeah, sure, I'll fight you. And it's like, look, I don't know him. I don't know his life. I don't know him personally, obviously. So I don't know what demons he's dealing with and whether or not he was in an altered state or not, and what that means. It doesn't matter. Like, you don't grab a person and throw them on the ground.
Yeah. What? Oh my gosh, my brain just completely fell out of my head.
All of that is me saying he shouldn't be the Flash, because the Flash is a superhero and kids are going to go to that movie and look up to that character. And I think that comes with a responsibility. And maybe that's me being very like moral high groundy, but that's my personal opinion on superheroes. I think that when you take on as an actor, I don't necessarily think you're a role model. I think that there are a lot of actors out there that are reprehensible people that turn in good performances that, you know, like we kind of separate these two things. We're going to talk about that after the break with a different case. But I do think that when you take on specifically the role of a superhero, and certainly when it's a high profile superhero like any of the Marvel or DC characters, you're taking on the responsibility of that character's persona in the public eye. And it comes with a lot of baggage. And if you're not willing to accept that baggage, you shouldn't be in that role.
Well, and that's the biggest thing that we've talked about before, right? Is that like if you do the work to change, like that's what we've talked about, why I love Mr. Darcy so much, right? Is that like he is without a doubt a giant jerk at the beginning, but he hears what he did wrong and changes and works actively to restore not only how he acts and feels, but to actually like make reparations and help people around him. And so if you're saying that about Shia LaBeouf, quite frankly, I had written Shia LaBeouf off and haven't really, like, I've sort of seen him coming back in. So cool, I'll revisit that. I would really love to see Ezra Miller speak to this.
Yep.
I know that as a woman, I have gotten drunk before and told my male friend to punch me because I thought that I could block it, and then they just punched me and I started bleeding, and I was like, oh, well, that was a stupid thing for me to have done. So like, and the problem that I have with this is that like I can't find. I don't know like he hasn't spoken to it. And that's kind of the thing that is really bumming me out about learning about this, is being like, oh man, he really should have at least like said something to like, you have to acknowledge and come forward and be able to like deconstruct and build and work and grow, so that what you're saying, that responsibility that comes with that superhero role. And if people are to look to you, I think that you need to unpack some of that stuff. And anyways, it's all, the world is an intricate place, and everybody is being held accountable for things right now.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things to take away from that part of the conversation is that we need to have more room in our society and our culture to accept when people do learn and grow and evolve, and give them the room to make up for their past mistakes. But that means two things. It means first and foremost celebrating especially men, because I think that there's a real problem with, you know, the way that we treat men and regard their evolution as human beings. In these respects, where it's like we want to downplay this stuff and boys will be boys and all that sort of thing.
No, come out and just like own it and learn and grow.
Like we need to be much better about celebrating the victories in this in these sort of circumstances. But the flip side of that is that we need to be more sort of steadfast in condemning the bad behavior when it's happening, and saying like, hey, look, there's a path out of this. There's definitely is a way to grow beyond this, and like cancel culture is making this stuff really difficult. But if a person is unwilling to accept the blame, the responsibility, to own it, then to me it's like, well, then you're not part of that conversation. You're not engaging in that conversation. You are just behaving the way that you behave because you think that you can do it without consequence. But because you're a movie star, right? And I don't care if you're eccentric or, you know, whatever, and if those eccentricities have been beneficial to other people in the past, I'm glad that has pushed that agenda forward. You don't get the credit for that. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't, like that doesn't balance out your present behavior.
You don't get to be an a-hole just because you're like fantastic at one other thing. And this leads right back to statues. Just because you founded something, it doesn't negate all the terrible things you did in the history. So
tear it down. We to borrow a page from the self-proclaimed one true God. False idols are dangerous and bad, and that's why that's the first commandment in the Bible, is because like false idols, they lead to damaging cultures. I think is the way to look at it. And so
false idols is the first commandment.
I mean, no God before the one true God. So that's false idols.
Okay, I was like, that seems very specific. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, because Moses comes back down and they got the golden calf, and they're all like, hey, check out this golden calf. It's pretty rad, right? We're going to pray to it now. And he's like, no, I left for a little while, and you guys come back and you've created a new God? And the best you could come up with was a gold cow? Like, anyways.
Hey, cows have a lot of secrets.
We don't need to get into
Let's not talk about
Jewish history right now. But
monotheism.
I'll just note, I did say Jewish history, not Christian history, because Christians have co-opted Judaism and made it as if it's their religion. It's not. They're just standing on the shoulders of Judaism. But anyways, I say that as a Christian.
I love it.
Let's take a break from some ads. I'm sure that whoever our advertisers are on this episode, whatever dynamic inserted ad you're listening to, they're super happy that they were bookended by this conversation. And by me being like, Christians trying to downplay Jewish history. Yeah, within 30 seconds of their ad, they're super excited about it. Awesome. Let's listen to some ads. Okay, before we get into our big topic in a second, just really quickly, thank you to our Patreon producers, Brian Murawski and JJ Samuel. You guys are awesome. And we appreciate everybody over at patreon.com/thunderquack who supports us there with their monthly pledge. Of course, you can go to patreon.com/thunderquack and kick in and get, you can get the episode early every Tuesday. How does it break down? It's for $1 you get it early, for $5 you get it without ads, and for $10 you get the uncut extended edition, and then $20 gets you the Patreon producer credit. So thank you to everybody who supports us at whatever level you support us, or even if you just download the podcast for free, and then listen to ads. It all makes a difference. It's all
and
important.
Rating and talking about us on podcast services around the globe. That's super helpful. I've started to really buy into that now because you kept talking about it throughout the 8 years that we were podcasting. Really. And I'm like, hey, there's something.
I'm glad something is sinking in.
You're onto something. Actually, somebody posted on my Facebook feed the other day where they're like, does anybody know how to do a podcast? And I'm kind of like, I know more than some people on the internet about how to podcast. Because they were asking super basic things where I was like, you need to get a hosting site. And you need to. And it was just it was kind of cool. I did not engage with them to help them with their podcast because I don't know enough. And I feel like it would have been extra burden where I was like, Mike, I don't know the answers to these questions. But I know at least enough now. So thank you for that education.
Yeah,
over the past decade.
My pleasure. You would think that after 8 years that you would know just a little tiny bit more, but
I did. Okay. I learned how to remember the brief foray I had into posting my own podcast.
You did. Did you? And you didn't finish Frankenstein, did you?
I sure didn't, but I fully intend to finish it before the end of 2020.
Cool.
I've told you about my reading is my big struggle this year, hey?
Yeah.
Where it's just driving me bananas that my brain can't psychologically wrap its head around reading right now. And I was so good. Last year I read a stupid amount of books. I read like 60 or 70 books last year, and they were I just would devour them. And this year, no joke, I think I've read maximum 9 books. And my brain, I just can't. I've started reading 20 of them. Anyways, woe is me. I will continue to read Frankenstein.
You're in luck because I've got 7 books and a play that you don't have to read. Unfortunately, you've already read them. But the topic we're going to talk about right now is JK Rowling.
Okay.
And her recent
wait,
nonsense.
What are we? What?
Yeah.
Are we? Yes. Okay.
And we're gonna talk specifically about that part of the controversy, which is what do we do now? What do we do now with Harry Potter as a franchise? And there are a few options.
Do we want to talk about the issue first?
Yeah, we're going to.
Okay.
But I was just about to say, before we get into what we can do now that we have absolute, without a shadow of a doubt, confirmation that JK Rowling is not worth our time. Before we get into that, let's talk about specifically why she's not. So in recent years, Rowling has said some stuff that people are like, that's a little bit questionable. And then she's kind of associated herself tangentially with some people that it's like, these aren't really the sort of people that you want people to be connecting the dots to. And those people are people within sort of the radical feminist community. Specifically, the term is TERF, TERF, which is trans exclusionary radical feminists. So to break that down, that term means feminists, women who essentially, like, this is a little bit reductive, but they think that all men are bad, including trans women. That might be confusing to some people, but
I will. Can I give my own explanation of what I feel like radical feminist is? Because it's just what were we talking in the previous sentence, that's like a generalization, and I think the thing as a woman going into this and explaining like why TERFs are terrible is that you first have to understand where radical feminists like are coming from so that you can break down why they're stupid. And the like essential part of that is that being a woman in the patriarchy and the society that we have been built with, there are intrinsic, systemic, institutionalized prejudices against us as women, and part of that is us like are like having uteruses and childbearing and the like burden of society on like motherhood and femininity, and that part of what like radical feminism is about is like reclaiming like as a woman that there are certain things that we need to fight against and fight for, and that there are all of these things that came before us, and so it's like, I don't know, it's the and I don't know if it's about like hating men, but it's about the idea that that men are intrinsic to the type of discrimination that women have faced, and that you can't take like that like it's sort of like is focused on that, and like to and in my opinion, the part that becomes sort of problematic about any type of radicalization is that it swings too far, right? Yeah. That you're like, the only way to deal with this is to completely like subjugate men and to make women better. And I know that that's reductive, because that's probably not what radical feminists would say that they're fighting for, but that's the sense that you get from it. To the point where JK Rowling got angry at an article where like the terminology was period having individuals or something like that, right? Where it's like people like with
people who
uteruses.
menstruate.
People who menstruate. There you go. Yeah. That's the terminology, right? Where it's like, I didn't even think twice about that, where I'm kind of like, yeah, because there are some people who menstruate who are not women. Mm-hmm. And so, but that becomes a thing where you go so far the other side where you're like, but no, that's such a part of who you are, and if you can't identify with that, and if you can't be proud of it, then you're doing a disservice to female kind, and therefore buying into the patriarchy and letting them win. And so to me, that is like the moment that you sort of be like, don't let the men win, is like the radical feminist side of things. And so I think that is intrinsic to the aspect of trans exclusionary radical feminists, because trans individuals negate that argument, right? Because if you fight for women's rights and women's liberation, then anybody who identifies as a woman should be able to fall under your umbrella. But if you think that a core tenet of being a woman is having a uterus or menstruating, not only are you actually negating a lot of women that are born for different reasons with different, physical makeups, but you also then negate trans men experiences, right? That like who they are as. So it's across the board that when you're reductive in how you think of feminism and how you think of your fight in this world, and how you unite voices to join up together, it becomes contrary to the thing that you're fighting for, because it actually winds up giving people less rights and less things to cling to and fight for, because the system is oppressing all of us. It's not just people who menstruate, right? And it just is the worst part about that, and about radical feminism, in my opinion, as someone who identifies very much as a feminist, right? That if you go too far in one direction, you actually start negating the conversation, and it winds up being not about the things that are important. It's not about how we can fight for justice or equality. It becomes about stupid things like whether or not certain people can use a bathroom without facing discrimination. Like it just, and I mean, now I'm just like on this like whole of like trans rights, but like some of the most, right, trans women are some of the most discriminated, abused, sexually assaulted individuals on the planet. And so for
specifically black trans women.
Yeah. And so for us to not include them in the conversation about women's rights and about feminism is just terrible. And on the flip side of that too, gay rights, right? I mean, Pride Month, happy Pride Month, and that everybody, it's very common knowledge now, I think, in many social circles, that black trans women, specifically a black trans woman, is sort of the reason we have Pride today because of the Stonewall riots. Is that the right?
Stonewall, yeah.
So I don't know. It's just such an important part of that conversation that when you have this woman who's sitting on her soapbox telling the world that only certain people can be valued in society, it just becomes really, really a big bummer. And they become not somebody that I necessarily want to look to as a child's author.
Yeah, and her language specifically is in service of disregarding trans designations, right?
Yeah.
So like in Rowling's ideology, saying trans woman as opposed to saying like outmoded and outdated terms like a transvestite male, right? Which is how we would have referred to it 10, 15 years ago. It's like she wants it to be really clear, this person has this genitalia and this person has this genitalia, right?
It's just not the point.
And for that to be the point, right? But it's the problem with that is that, first of all, it is negating where we are in society at this point in time and how we use language to convey these ideas and how people self-identify and how they want to be identified, which is the most important aspect of it. Because if we can't respect that about another person, like, what are we even doing? Like, there's no point. Because that's sort of the most base thing of like, what do I identify as? Just let me be like what I want to be, as long as it's not harming another person.
You learn who somebody is by asking them.
Yeah.
What's your name?
Yeah.
What do I call you? How do I relate to you as a person in society?
So
it's a base function. You let somebody identify themselves.
Even if we're like getting like, that is sort of the base of where we should be just in terms of language. But if we want to go, because I know that there's going to be some people that are going to listen to this. Our audience isn't huge, but our audience is big enough that I think that we've probably got some people that some of the stuff that we're saying might be new ideas to them. And I want to say like it's similar to what we were talking about before the break. Like, allow yourself a little bit of room to grow here. Allow yourself to be where you're at right now and take a step at your pace, and be open-minded and take in some of what we're saying. And it's going to be a lot. We're kind of coming at you hard and fast with this stuff because we want to get into the actual conversation about Harry Potter. But just to like set the record straight to anybody who would be like, yeah, but there are two sexes. There's male and there's female. There are people with a penis and people with a vagina, black and white, gender, a binary. If that's where you come at it and you use the word biological in that argument, you need to stop, take a beat, remove yourself from what you've been trained to think for your entire life, do a little bit of actual scientific research, read a little bit, and learn that chromosomally, it's actually more complex than XX and XY. So
much more.
There
basic,
are
like,
actually
biology.
Variations. And then beyond that, not just the biological component, but also the psychological component. And then if you really want to get into it, the metaphysical component of it, which is something that's a completely other conversation that needs its own whole thing. But like, have a room in your worldview for, if you can accept that some people believe in Jesus and some people believe in like the Prophet Muhammad, and some people believe in reincarnation. If you can respect that, then you need to also be able to respect this sort of stuff, because it's like, we're not talking about different things from an ideological perspective. But then there is science, there is biology that backs up the assertion that gender, sex, it's not a binary, they are spectrums, and you can be anywhere on that. And we've sort of been indoctrinated and trained into thinking that it is this binary because it's easy. Its classification is a big thing with human beings, in case you haven't noticed. And we really, really like to put things in specific boxes. And the fewer boxes, the easier life is. So we tend to want to generalize things and lump people into these really big boxed groups of male, female. Because that's what's super easy. It's what you look like, and it's what you were born with, and all of that sort of stuff. But that's just not the way that it is. Like, even myself, as someone who is a heterosexual, cisgendered man, it's like, it's not that simple. It's like, I've talked about it on past podcasts, but like, I played Dragon Age Inquisition, and played that as a female character, and found myself falling in love with a male character, and making decisions not based on logic, not based on gameplay, not based on story, but like on a literal affection, a romantic affection that my character, in quotes, had for this guy. And I did something that was completely out of character and completely not in keeping with the way that I was playing the game, because I cared so much about that man that I wasn't gonna, I did something immoral and outside of, my normal decision-making process to protect him. And it like, that was my moment of going like, okay, so it is a spectrum, and there are weird things that can pop into your head, and it is okay. Like, that's fine. And when I say weird, I don't mean weird as in bad. I mean weird as in, like a deviation from, even that's bad, because then it goes into the word deviant. But like, just like something that like you every day you get up and you brush your teeth. Every day you get up and you brush your teeth, and you brush your teeth and you brush your teeth. And then one morning you get up and, instead of brushing your teeth first, you read the newspaper and then you brush your teeth. And it's like, okay, that was different. It was just different. It wasn't a bad thing or a good thing. It was just a different experience that one time. Put it in, and maybe somebody else got up, read the newspaper before they brushed their teeth, and they went, this is preferable.
Yeah.
I like this more than brushing my teeth first thing when I get out of bed. And who cares? Who cares? It doesn't make a difference. Some people don't brush their teeth in the morning at all. And it really doesn't affect you and whether or not you brush your teeth first thing in the morning. So
yeah, exactly. You're allowed to like think that that's probably something that you wouldn't choose for yourself, because brushing your teeth is something that you value very much as an individual.
If Oscar Isaac walked in right now and said, Mike, I want to kiss you square on the lips, I would say 100%, I have to check with my wife first. I'm pretty sure she's going to be okay with it.
Have you not added him to your list yet? I feel
he's definitely on my list, but I would still in the moment say, like, I do need to talk to Crystal about this and make sure that she is still okay with this, because we are in a committed monogamous relationship. That's true. And adding Oscar Isaac into it is something that we've definitely talked about, but I just want to make sure that where she's at and where I'm at are still the same, because human beings are not static. So if he walked in and he did say that to me and that opportunity presented itself, I would be doing myself a disservice to not take that opportunity and explore that avenue.
Of course. It's totally true.
There's literally not, I don't think that there's anybody else that I would make that exception for. Maybe there's a couple other guys. But like, that doesn't mean that I necessarily am like, oh my God, I'm gay. It turns out that I'm gay, you guys. It also
No,
doesn't mean that I want to have
Oscar Isaac.
like gay. I'm going to use, we're getting into some weird words that we don't usually use on this podcast, but in the nature of being open and honest about this, I'm not going to have gay penetrative sex with a guy. Like, it's not.
But that doesn't mean that you can't love
me.
him. But you can still love him and have him as part of your life.
And it also doesn't mean that, like, very close friends of mine that do choose to live that lifestyle, it's not, like, it's no skin off my nose that somebody else wants to do that. I don't care.
You know,
if you're happy and you're not harming other people, then I support you in that, and that's the important part of that. We are way off.
We are, but this is an important part of that conversation, because it was this eye-opening thing for me that when I was in university and I started to like have this wide social circle that, like, and we've talked about this before, that I'm one of the very few people that I know in my life that doesn't identify as queer. Like, very few. And so one of the like biggest like eye-opening things about that was when somebody had said something about how you define sex as being in and of itself somewhat discriminatory.
Yeah.
Because just because you believe it to be something doesn't mean that that's how everybody believes it. And that's part of the beautiful thing about this spectrum of life, is that just because you grew up a certain way, or like and sexual orientation having like is very different from like your own like sexual, like it's all different things, right? And just because somebody chooses to have no sex in their life doesn't mean that they can't have meaningful and full relationships, and that it somehow like negates their femininity or their masculinity or anything to do with or their identity or anything like that.
Well,
so it's
also
just
the base idea that a lack of femininity or masculinity is a negative, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like, I think when you break it down into the core element, like, that's really what a lot of it comes down to. It comes down to these ideas of what the gender norms are, what boxes you're supposed to check, and them feeling deficient because you're not living up to that. And I'm of the personal belief that the majority of people who have hang-ups on this stuff, it is like, homophobia is not about being afraid of another person being gay. It's about being afraid of yourself, right? And very often, and we see it in storytelling all of the time, that like the most homophobic character in a show is the person who's like who's closeted themselves and
or
can't
you
even
be
accept
true
it.
to yourself, like understanding your own emotions and where you come from and how you relate to, and it's those insecurities that lead to the lashing out and the negativity. But then there are other people like Rowling, to bring it back to her, and I think where her experience is coming from, she had very bad experiences with men. And that has radicalized her in her feminism, and it's to the extent that she can't see the forest for the trees, and it's really unfortunate, and it's a very understandable place to get to. But in the same way that we're kind of talking about Ezra Miller, it's like once people have told you that the behavior is not cool and that we're not copacetic, right? For you to then double down on it, triple down on it. And not be open and understanding to the differences and nuances.
You're saying to people, I hear what you're saying. I understand the point that you're making. I'm choosing to invalidate it with my own actions. And that's violence. Like that, like just in a very basic sense. It's not physical violence, but it is like any time that you are taking choice away from another human being or another living being of any kind, like that, you are committing a violent act. And that what she has done, the decisions that she's made in the recent weeks, like those are violent acts, because she's not only making that decision for herself, but as a role model, as somebody with a fan base, she's actually mobilizing an army of people.
That's the worst part about it, when you speak from a pulpit. And I do just want to make sure that we're clear here too, because whenever we talk about trans rights and LGBT rights and queer conversations, I just want to make it clear that there is a difference, obviously, between who you're sexually attracted to, like who you have sex with, versus how you identify and your own gender, which is separate from the genitalia that you have. They're like three separate conversations, but the reason that we talk about them is because a lot of times they are linked to one another and fall in that sort of spectrum thing. So I really hope that this isn't your only intro to examining these kinds of issues, and that you're very well versed in other people and can speak to it. But I just wanted to tag on that as well, because that I think that just because the conversations that you have, they're linked to one another, but they don't necessarily talk about one another. You can have people that are TERFs that support gay rights, and it doesn't mean that they're a great person because they support gay rights or LGBT causes, because they actually undermine other parts of that conversation that are really important. And whenever we're talking about what you often like to use the term Venn diagram, right? There's a large overlap in communities in which the conversation is not exclusionary. So one of the things that's really frustrating about Rowling in particular is that she uses the card where she's like, my lesbian butch friends say this. And it's like, well, that is not you probably should shush a little bit in how you're approaching this argument. And the other side of it too, that actually turns into our direct social circle, is that someone active in the trans community in Vancouver actually directly tweeted at Rowling because Rowling accidentally, or who knows what happened, but a tweet in terms of some kid drew a little monster from her upcoming book, and so she was praising the little drawing, but also threw in some terrible language that was very TERFy into it. And so somebody in Vancouver, she basically tweeted at Rowling and was like, hey, you need to be careful about what you say around kids. And then it became this whole thing where Rowling was like, that's hate speech against me and it's defamation. And anyways, it wound up being this whole thing where it's people that are part of a community and speak to an experience about discrimination and how discrimination breeds from childhood are people that we should listen to and understand, instead of automatically putting our hackles up and being like, I'm powerful and I will sue you and I will take you for everything that you're worth if you don't shut up right now. And that, to me, was when I first started really engaging in this conversation. JK Rowling's been called a TERF on the internet for many, many years. This is not brand new information. No. But the reason that it's sort of starting to evolve and just become exacerbating is because it's really doubling down on it in the recent future in a way that is problematic and harmful, because if you start to perpetrate something, if you're in that position of, especially a kid's author, right? If people look up to you and they think that what you say matters, then you need to know that what you say matters. And if you utilize that to spread hatred and misunderstanding and discrimination, it's not a good thing. And that at the end of the day is sort of the unfortunate part. And then we go in and dissect, then what does that mean for Harry Potter? This franchise that everybody loves and means so much. The queer community connects with Harry Potter. I don't know. I mean, that could just be very specifically the queer community that I am aware of and part of. But I mean, there's so much that Harry Potter did to bring online communities together at the same time where online communities were being open to kids that hadn't had queer spaces before. And I think that there's a correlation between the time in which Harry Potter was so popular, and that, I mean, we have the Vlog brothers because of Harry Potter, and I think that people don't really realize that so many of these important people exist because they came together in these communities that JK Rowling started. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's this is the core of the conversation that I wanted to have initially, which was, what do we do with the art when we find out that the artist is a deeply coming from a deeply flawed perspective. And I think it's difficult. I think that there are two things that I personally want to do with it, which is like I'm not gonna diminish my enjoyment of Harry Potter. Those stories mean something to me because of my experience with them. And I'm not gonna. I don't think that it's. I think it's sort of intellectually disingenuous to say that you can divorce yourself from that. Like,
oh no, you can't. You have
your
to read
experiences
Ender's
make you.
Game and understand what you're reading.
Yeah, but
Like,
but it doesn't mean that I have to support Harry Potter as a omni global mega corporation,
right? Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
So, I'm gonna go out of my way to not purchase officially licensed Harry Potter merchandise from now on. And that's something that I have done as recently as back at Halloween. We did, Crystal and I were just saying, it's like, Crystal was like, so do we need to get rid of that? And I was like, no, we don't need to get rid of that stuff. Like, we made the purchase already. Like, it's like throwing it out isn't going to reverse the fact that a couple of pennies of that went into her pocket, right? Like, but we can be conscious about it in the future. And we can choose to not support her specifically by way of not purchasing the officially licensed stuff. And here's the thing.
There is so much fanfic on the internet that you can love.
Yeah, it does not look, you can pirate the books, you can pirate the movies. They're on Netflix anyways, but some of them. But and however that works, streaming services.
I do have and here's the thing, as somebody that works in the industry, and this is, I think, important in terms of authorship, that if you are enjoying something that was written by somebody, unfortunately, there is a certain amount of equation in terms of like buying it from that person. The extended universe and merchandising and like global phenomenon, I fully agree with that, right? Like that don't go all out to like engage in the spoils of war, as it were, but that's not where people make their money anyways. Like buying a book from somebody is not how they make their money, right? No. It's the franchise that makes the money. So sorry, just because anytime the piracy is, my own little.
To be clear, like in general, I am anti-piracy, right? Like I think that artists should be paid for their art,
things that you could do,
But I am saying that in this instance, when someone is as dangerous and damaging as Rowling has been in the last little while, I think you are well within your rights to say, I don't want any of my money to go to this person, but I do still want to enjoy this piece of art. Yeah. That does then write out all of the other people who contributed to the films and that sort of thing, who deserve their cut of that. But it's going to be a personal decision for everybody. And I think that I already own the movies. We already own the books. Like those decisions were already made a long time ago, and that money's already been spent. So there's I'm sitting from a place of it doesn't really, it's not difficult for me to say go ahead and pirate it. I don't have to deal with that moral quandary myself. But I am saying if that's an act of protest that you want to take, I think that that's a totally valid perspective to have in this instance, right? If you're mad at George Lucas because he put space lizards back into A New Hope, and Han Solo steps on the slug's tail.
Yeah, it's so frustrating.
So you don't ever want to pay for a Star Wars movie again. I think that you're being a petulant child, right? I think that that's stupid.
But those people exist. So
but those people absolutely exist.
Can I offer an alternative perspective too? Because I think that John Green sometimes speaks to this too. That and I don't know. I can't recall that it was a long time ago, and it's just something where it's the idea of how do you distinguish between artist and art, and where does the art become the audiences. And I think that a long time ago, Harry Potter started to belong to the community and the readers in a way that was completely separate from the journey that JK continued to take it on. Yeah. And so there is a certain understanding that I have, and how I I choose to come at this, because you can understand and appreciate something for what it is without glorifying the person.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, this is so relevant. You can understand that Christopher Columbus was an important part of how North America has been founded without erecting statues to him. We can't separate colonialism and who we are and how we came, aside obviously from the First Nations people, but how we came to this place and this land that we're on without identifying and acknowledging who got us here and saying maybe that was really problematic, but we're here now, and how we take this forward is actually what matters. So let's tear down their statues. Let's tear down their epitaphs. Let's remember that they existed and that they got us here, but let's not glorify them anymore. And let's just own it as who we are, as readers, as audiences, as lovers of this important work that speaks to childhood experience and belonging and difference and ironically about what it's like to transform into Harry Potter and still be a woman inside at your core, because Hermione refers to herself as a woman even though she looks like Harry on the outside. Just thought that was a really interesting thing that someone on the internet pointed out, where it's like, hey, JK, maybe you want to evaluate the words that you wrote in your book if you don't believe that this is something that can exist. So,
yeah, but and the other part of it, I think, is to just I incorporate the information about the artist into your reading of the text.
And
understand the context. No different than if you were reading Shakespeare or if you were reading the Bible.
Right.
It is important to have historical context. It's important to understand the person who held the pen, and what their motivations might have been in putting pen to paper.
And we can't negate the fact that you're right. JK Rowling being this single mother that had gotten out of this terrible place, and that inspired this little boy in a cupboard that changed, I think, very fundamentally pop culture and in as a consequence the world in many ways, is important and impossible to completely separate. And I think that there's something there that's important to acknowledge, that it really does come from this intrinsic understanding that she has with the world.
I think we can do a little bit of taking the good with the bad, and just being aware. For example, something that is in the text that is very difficult to deal with is the one prominent Asian character is named Cho Chang, which sounds like, when you say it out loud, it sounds like a joke. Yeah. Right? Like it's just the the lack of sensitivity in creating that character with that name in that story. It's like, it's just something to be aware of. I think. I don't think that I think that character is actually a great character. I think that she's an important part of Harry's journey, and an important part of the overall themes of adolescence and growth and all of that sort of thing that the books do so well. But I can enjoy that character and still stop and go, maybe we don't just go with the first Asian name that popped into our head. Maybe we stop for a second. We'd be a little bit more thoughtful about that sort of stuff in the future, right? Yeah. And I think that one of the most difficult things that happens when somebody does reveal themselves to be discriminatory or abusive, or all of these things that contribute to these ideas of canceling a person, that my problem with cancel culture is sort of like the erasure of anything negative and bad that we don't want to think about, right? Sort of to the detriment of the lessons learned via those people's stories and experiences. So I think it's important to acknowledge, to look at it and go, JK Rowling was a very deeply flawed person. She is now, and that means that she probably was when she wrote these books. And so some of that stuff's going to come through. And there's some weird things that happened after the fact, like saying after the books are out, oh yeah, Dumbledore's totally gay, by the way. Right? Like, it's like, yeah, okay, that's great in a sense. It's also a little bit like, hey, I'm just going to throw this in. I'm not going to put it in the book because it might offend some people and I don't want that to affect my sales. But after the fact, when it's fashionable to do so, I'm going to go ahead and say, yeah, Dumbledore was gay. Right? Yeah.
It undermines the people that are actually putting the work in to make stories that are inclusive and that, hey, someone said Animorphs is really great as a great fantasy alternative. Yeah. Super inclusionary and
there are other things other than the monoliths, other than the Harry Potter, the Star Wars, the Lord of the Rings. Because Lord of the Rings, again, another one. J.R.R. Tolkien.
Ooh, yeah.
There's a lot of problematic stuff in his history, in his past. And yet, we're farther removed from that, so it's a little bit easier for us to go to sort of separate art from artist. And, if we really knew William Shakespeare, I'm sure that we would find stuff about him, especially with the time that he lived in.
Oh, yeah. No, without a doubt, William Shakespeare is probably one of the most...
and the men that held the I don't know what writing implements they used in 2000, or in the year 0, I guess. But the guys who wrote the Bible, very problematic human beings. Yeah. Very problematic. Yeah. One specifically, in my personal opinion, that a lot of people put a lot of stock in. Its name starts with a P. We don't need to get into theology because I think that Amanda would be a little bit out of her wheelhouse. But.
I don't understand. Except for the best thing about theology that has happened recently is when people have been like talking about the Bible, being like, hey, so do people understand that this is a book that does not have white people in it? And then someone's like, the Romans were white. And the guy's like, okay, sure, I'll give it to you. The people that arrested and killed Jesus Christ were white.
Now, let's be really clear. They were Caucasian.
Oh, okay.
Right? Yes. Like, you were quoting verbatim the thing, the meme or whatever, the post. And I think I've reposted that as well. Yeah. So yes, where you're coming from is 100%.
And I know zero things about the Bible nor anything else besides that post. I just thought it was
my quibble with that is just that, like, okay, we're going to say white, but I'm like... We're talking about Caucasian. So, like, because those people, the Romans at the time would not have been fair-skinned. They would not have been, like, just to further the point of, like, there are no white people in the Bible. That the fair skin, that comes from, like, the Germanic Caucasians. And, like, when we're talking about Romans, we're talking about pre-Italy Italians. And Greeks, and they were very brown-skinned, and they looked very much like Middle Eastern people, who are also technically not Caucasian in the sense of white-skinned, but Caucasoid in terms of the three. This is difficult stuff to get into, but
I was gonna say you're educating a lot on this meme that I meant to be a. I apologize. Sure. It was I didn't mean for it to. It was just my contribution to the theology discussion.
My thing is that it's just that, like, there's so much more nuance to that statement of course. than sort
as
of
there
like
is
the,
with anything
the
in life,
pop
right?
sort of way of talking about it. Yeah. Because yes, absolutely, 100%. There's not a fair-skinned person in the Bible. Everybody probably was some shade of brown, whether it was a deep olive tan or straight up like black African. And there are many people who believe that Jesus was very likely African, like of African descent, because you've got the Jews coming out of Egypt, and like there's going to be some African blood mixed in there with those Jews. They're not all going to look like what we think of now, which is very much Eastern European Jews. But anyways, it's a whole thing. I could get into racial politics and theology, and that could be its own episode.
Sounds like a podcast in itself.
But it's also something that I'm not nearly as educated on as I should be in order to talk about it in a public forum
You
like
could
this.
probably find a podcast that talks about.
There's probably somebody who knows
specific
more
thing.
about this than I do.
Yeah.
For sure. But my point is just like, that is the iceberg analogy. It's like, that's the 10%. That's above the surface. Is the statement like there are no white people in the Bible. But yeah, then to turn it on its head of like, well, what about the Romans? It's like, yes, the cops. The cops
So it's
were
like,
white.
Yeah, so it's just like
The cops that were persecuting the Middle Eastern people were definitely
the reductive meme.
If you wanna point out somebody as being white, good job. You've made my point for me.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's the purpose. That's more the purpose of the meme is being like, let's look to the color, like the history of the world.
It's not
and
just the last
realize.
200 years or 400 years in the United States. It is actually the last several thousand years that white people have been doing this to other people. Cool. On that note, I think this is the thing. Just don't be a dick. Right?
It sounds so simple.
It does sound so simple. It's a really hard thing to live every day and understand that these ideologies of being good to one another and doing good things and that sort of stuff. Like, say, we're not going to all live up to these ideals every single day. I think if the overarching theme of tonight's episode is anything, it's take in information and grow as a person.
Yeah.
And if you're doing that and you're listening, truly listening to other people and truly seeking to not do other people harm, then you're on the right path. And you're going to make mistakes along the way. And you're going to say some stupid stuff and do some stupid stuff. And you are gonna hurt people. Everybody's gonna hurt people from time to time. It's the nature of humanity. But I think it's important that we just, put context around that stuff and we learn from it, and we learn to recognize when someone deserved our ire and when somebody was the victim of a prejudice or a wrong way of thinking. Because there are definitely jerks out there, and they definitely need to be treated like they're jerks. This isn't about everybody standing around in a circle, holding hands and singing Kumbaya, but it is about saying to people like taking choice away and saying to them, because of who you choose to be or identify as, I'm going to exclude you from something or persecute you unjustly. That's kind of the place where I think we draw the line. But if somebody's a jerk, you can call them out for being a jerk.
Yep. And just because you're really not a jerk to one group of people and a super jerk to other people, it doesn't negate all of the bad that you've done. Just because you're like, but I am really good over here, so therefore I get to be a jerk here.
It's kind of like the negative times a positive thing, right? Because people want to use the negative times a negative equals a positive thing a lot, and it's like, okay, that's not really how the world works. That's just how theoretical made up math works, because negative numbers are imaginary. But a negative times a positive always equals a negative.
Ooh, look at that math knowledge.
Right? Like it
Good
always
job,
equals a
Mike.
negative. So I think like that's what you're saying is that like whatever we shouldn't say whatever positive, because I mean, like, Gandhi did a lot of positive stuff, but then he also had some real wrong-headed ways of thinking as well. So
it's almost like nobody's perfect, and the whole purpose of life is to grow and change as a person and try to do the least amount of harm as possible while making the world a little bit of a better place than when you came to it. Maybe
being a good person can't be boiled down to a catchphrase or a bumper sticker. That might actually be the lesson.
Memes. Yeah.
That might be the lesson, but it's really, that's difficult.
Because it's not as catchy to write on a piece of cardboard and march through the streets.
Because I want to say don't be a dick is a good motto to live by, but I also want to say punching Nazis in the face is perfectly fine. Like, that's okay. There's nothing I don't have a problem with that. So, life is complicated. This is a very long episode.
But it had some nerdy stuff in it.
It did have some nerdy stuff in it.
I think the moral of the story is that if you want the nerdy stuff, you just have to take it on top of and including all of the other political stuff of the world.
The nerdy stuff is definitely the spoonful of sugar in this episode, where we're like, look, we got a lot of medicine to get through, but if you take it all down, there's a gummy bear in it for you.
I had fun, though. This is good.
This is a good episode.
I need to go to bed, though.
It's very late. I'm so
late.
tired. I'm getting a little punchy. Okay. Thank you for listening. You can check out all the other awesome podcasts in the Thunderquack Podcast Network by heading to thunderquack.com. And if you want to follow us, you can do that by going to facebook.com/thunderquack, on Twitter @thunderquackpod, and on Instagram @thunderquackpodcast.
You can also follow us individually on Twitter. I'm at Akonkin, AKONKIN. You can add an 86 to that for Instagram.
And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram @Arkwolf, ARKWULF. Awesome. Thank you for listening. You can support us in 3 ways. First is by going to the podcast service of your choice, leaving a rating and review to let other people know that this mess of a podcast might actually be worth listening to. It's great because it helps other people find us so that they can tell us all the stupid things that we said tonight, maybe correct us in a few places, and
help us learn and grow as people.
Learn and grow as people, yeah. Which is a great way to support us. Another great way is by going to store.thunderquack.com to pick up some merchandise. Put that there Thunderquack logo on your face with a face mask right now so that people can be like, I'm really glad that you're being conscientious of everybody else's health, but what the hell is a Thunderquack? Except for the 5 people who are gonna be like, oh, Darkwing Duck, and you're like, actually a podcast network. It's very weird branding. I'm supposed to be an expert. The last way that you can support us is by going to patreon.com/thunderquack, as we mentioned before, and kicking in with your monthly pledge of support. Thank you to everybody who does. You guys are awesome. Everybody's awesome. Our Facebook group is so cool.
Oh,
I just want to say that.
It's like the reason that I'm on Facebook is because of the Facebook group.
It's the reason that I'm on Facebook as well, because I'm quite frankly getting sick of seeing old people posting stuff, and I really just want to like abandon that platform and just hang out on Twitter and Instagram, where millennials belong, right? And stay away from TikTok because it's not for me.
It's not for the old people.
Yeah. I don't want to get made fun of. You can lurk. This is the thing. This is the thing that I've learned lately, is that lurking is okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, is just it? Like don't try and engage because it's not going to go well.
Don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
Hey, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
It's a logistics question. Does this count as our 3rd week of podcasting because you podcasted with somebody else previously, and so it was 3 weeks of podcasts, or are we back next week?
I don't know. That's a really good question. Let's go ahead and say
we'll leave it up to our mental health, and if you get a podcast next week, surprise.
Yeah. There you go. That's a good one.
Is that okay? I love being non-committal. It makes me happy.
There's nothing better than leaving the people who pay for the podcast not knowing what they're about to get because they paid for it. I think that next week's probably going to be a week off. And then
it's the short week because of the holiday too. Like it's Canada Day and
I also
American holidays.
I to pull back the curtain a little bit. I'm raring to get Star Wars Faster, More Intense back up and running, which we haven't done any episodes since The Mandalorian finished.
Oh yeah.
And we've been done with Rebel Cells since Clone Wars completed at the beginning of May. So it's been about 2 months, and it's actually a lot of work because I've got a whole bunch of guests lined up and some really, really cool content coming down the pipe for that. So
nice.
I will say that like, hey, we're gonna take that week off. We're going to take this next week off because I am gearing up to get that stuff ready to go. But go over to Faster, More Intense and subscribe to that podcast because there's going to be some really cool conversations from some voices that maybe you haven't heard. I mean, if you only listen to my Star Wars podcast, then you definitely haven't heard some of these voices before. But even if you're in the sort of larger Star Wars community, you might not be super familiar with some of the people that I'm about to bring on. We're going to talk a lot about Reylo over the next month on Faster, More Intense, and I am very excited about it because I had a personal journey in that needs to be commemorated in podcast form.
Mike's more of a Reylo than me now, man. I'm so excited.
I'm a hardcore Reylo now.
I'm so excited.
They radicalized me. I have been radicalized, and I'm now I will fight people on Twitter about this stuff. And I'll do it if you slide into my DMs on Instagram. I will write until Instagram says, "Hey, you've reached the character limit. You have to send this now or stop talking." And Sarah Beth can attest to that because she messaged me yesterday and was like, "Hey, so," because I posted a picture and she was like, "I just can't get behind it," and I was like, "Let me tell you about my journey and how I feel about it now." And we had a nice little conversation about it. So
nice.
I've definitely been radicalized by the Reylo community, and I am now one of them. More about that on Star Wars Faster, More Intense over the next month, as well as a bunch of other cool Star Wars stuff. So lots to talk about over there. And we'll take a week off, but here's what I'll say. As always, like, the offer is still out there, especially like as we are still in the midst of Black Lives Matter and the protests and everything. If you have a podcast you want to suggest, or you have a podcast yourself that you'd like us to highlight, that week off is a perfect time for us to drop something in the feed for everybody to listen to. And it's not necessarily a thing for Patreon, but for our regular listeners, that's something that I'm more than happy to do.
I love it.
So just hit us up. I mean, like, it's not just that week, but anytime. If you guys think that there's a podcast out there from a community that we don't represent, being that Amanda and I are a couple of white people, heterosexual cisgendered white people at that, we're just the worst.
Yeah, I know.
We're the default setting in a video game. It's obnoxious. So if you've got something you want to suggest, or something that you do yourself that you'd like us to highlight you, we want to use our platform to help our audience find more diverse viewpoints to listen to. So all in the effort to maybe make the world a little bit of a better place in the best way that we can. So it sucks that this is tagged right at the end of the episode, but that's where it came up in conversation. So we'll do better in the future. That's something that I need to make a point of saying at the beginning of the episode, not at the very end.
Hashtag quiver all the way.
Yeah. Thank you guys for listening. We'll catch you in a couple weeks.
Stay safe, everybody. Wash your hands and be kind to one another.